Hey everybody, my name is Eli Gilbert, and today I want to talk to you about the most important aspect of playing bluegrass banjo, and that's right hand technique. If you listen to Earl Scruggs or J.D. Crowe, or any bluegrass banjo player worth listening to, you'll notice that they have a rock-solid right hand. And that's a really big part of what makes bluegrass so exciting, the rhythmic intensity coming directly from the right hand of the banjo player. So let's get into all that, but first do me a huge favor and subscribe to this channel and like this video. That's a huge help to anyone who makes their living making videos like I do. And if you're looking for tablature and practice tips and live streams, all kinds of stuff that you can't find here on YouTube, then you should head to patreon.com/EliGilbertBanjo. Anyway, let's talk about right hand technique. Every suggestion that I'm going to give you today is with the intention of emulating and participating in the bluegrass banjo language. That means that we're going to try to play with a sound influenced by Earl Scruggs and the lineage of great banjo players that were influenced by Earl Scruggs, like J.D. Crowe or Sonny Osborne, all the way to Bela Fleck and Note Pikelny. We're not trying to sound exactly like any of those players. We're just trying to land somewhere in that ballpark. Of course, if you don't like any of those banjo players, then don't follow any of this advice. And by the way, I really mean it. You can and should play however you want. But if you're watching this video, then I'm going to assume that you're interested in playing in the style of Earl Scruggs and the banjo players that came after him. And if you disagree with anything that I say in this video, that's totally fine. The fact that you disagree means that you're happy with what you're doing now and you don't need my help. Anyway, there are three main areas that we're going to focus on today with respect to right hand technique. And those are finger picks, planting on the head of the banjo, and the angle of your wrist and your hand. All three of those factors can be adjusted for virtually unlimited options in terms of tone and volume. So let's start with finger picks. Yes, you do need to use finger picks if you want to play bluegrass banjo. Note that I didn't say that you have to use finger picks to play the banjo. But if you want to play bluegrass banjo in Scruggs style with 3 fingers, then you're not going to be heard over even one instrument, let alone an entire band, without finger picks. Beyond that, it's absolutely impossible to achieve bluegrass banjo tone without them. And trust me, I know that in the beginning it can be a little uncomfortable, and at first it can be harder to play with finger picks than without finger picks. But I promise that's temporary. But what picks should you be using? Well, first of all, I'm going to suggest that you use a plastic thumb pick. There are a few companies out there using other materials for thumb picks, like metal for instance, but I haven't met many people who have particularly good things to say about them. It's not the end of the world, but I don't recommend it. I personally use a Dunlop Ultex thumb pick, and I've had good results with Golden Gate picks. There are a lot of different manufacturers, but in the beginning, just find yourself a plastic thumb pick that fits securely on your thumb and doesn't move around too much. As for finger picks, I use the Sammy Sheeler signature picks, which are considerably more expensive than anything you're going to find in your average music store. So I wouldn't even bother looking at those yet. Part of the reason you don't need to worry that much about which picks you're using is that in the beginning stages, you don't actually have enough experience to know what you prefer. So later on down the line, you're going to have a good idea of what you like and what you don't like in terms of the sound that they create. So for now, as far as finger picks go, just find something reasonably priced that doesn't have any special gimmick or special material, and hopefully they look somewhat like this. Once you actually have your finger picks, you want to bend and shape them so that they fit securely on your finger. You don't want to cut off your circulation, but you also don't want them sliding off while you're playing. You may have also noticed that I've bent the blades of my finger picks in a particular way. And if you look at other banjo players, you'll see that there are a wide range of ways that you can bend your picks. And there isn't just one way to do it, but you probably want to have a decent curve in the pick so that the string slides off the tip of the pick without too much resistance. But don't worry about getting this all perfect right now, because what we talk about in the rest of this video is going to inform how you bend your picks. Okay, so now that we've actually got our picks, before we even play anything, we need to make sure that we're planting 1 or 2 fingers on the head of the banjo, and that's going to give us more control over our tone and more stability. And unfortunately, this is yet another aspect of bluegrass banjo that's not so comfortable in the beginning. But if you get used to it now, it will become the new normal, and you'll forget it was even an issue. But which fingers do you plant? Well, you could plant your ring finger, or your little finger, or both your ring and little finger. And all 3 options are valid, but I'm going to suggest that if you want to play bluegrass banjo, that you at least try to plant both your ring and little finger. Planting both fingers is going to give you the most stability, which is really helpful when you're trying to control volume and tone without your hand moving around unpredictably. In addition to that, it's what Earl Scruggs did, which is really never a bad place to look for guidance. And as a result of Earl Scruggs planting both fingers, players like J.D. Crowe and Sonny Osborne and Bela Fleck and Note Pikelny all plant both fingers. But now I need to confess something. I actually don't plant both fingers. I only plant my little finger. Trust me, I tried to plant both fingers. I actually spent over a year planting both fingers on the head. And you can watch some of my old videos where I do that, and it actually sounds okay. But here's the reality. When I plant my ring finger in any capacity, it severely limits the range of motion of my middle finger. And even though in some cases I was able to even get a decent sound by planting both fingers, I had to work significantly harder just to be able to reach all of the strings, and that created a lot of tension in my right hand, which was ultimately detrimental to everything that I was doing. So my advice to you is this. Start out by trying to plant both fingers. That's your best bet if you can do it. If you can't, then planting both fingers is ultimately going to hinder your development. So then try planting just one, either the ring finger or the little finger. And when you do plant on the head, you don't need to apply too much pressure, just enough so that you're not moving around unintentionally. And if you're wondering where to plant on the head of the banjo, that's going to become more clear when we talk about the wrist position. But the short answer is anywhere between the bridge and the neck, depending on the sound you want. If I'm playing the kickoff to a song or rolling back up, then I'm probably going to put my finger about a ½ inch to an inch in front of the bridge, like this. But if I'm playing something like up the neck, back up, and I want a little bit more of a mellow tone, then I'll put my hand a little closer to the neck. For now, just try planting close to the bridge, maybe a ½ inch or an inch away. Okay, so we have our picks and we've planted on the head, but now we need to make sure that the position of our hand and our wrist is going to actually help us play with good tone and good volume. And for the most part, everything we do with our hand and our wrist is going to serve the goal of getting our picks perpendicular to the strings. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly perpendicular, but what we're avoiding is something like this. So to achieve this, we have a couple different options. We can change the angle of the banjo strings, we can change the angle of our wrist, we can change how much our wrist is arched, we can also rotate our picks so that they hit the strings at a different angle. But especially with the angle in your wrist, you want to be really careful so you don't injure yourself. You really don't need any more than a slight angle in your wrist. And if you look at most banjo players playing in the style of Earl Scruggs, and Earl Scruggs himself, they actually all play with a relatively straight wrist. As a place to start, you can put your banjo neck at about a 45-degree angle and keep a relatively straight wrist and maybe a little bit of an arch, and then your picks you can rotate to see if you can get them perpendicular to the strings. One of the best things you can do is look at pictures or videos of a lot of great banjo players. If you see a lot of people doing something, it's probably a good place to start. If you see one person doing something, it might just be an exception to the rule. If you can't find anyone out there doing what you do, then you might be the exception to the rule, but it's kind of unlikely. There are definitely differences in our physiology that means every person is going to play slightly differently. But it's just that, slightly differently. It's unlikely that you're going to achieve the tone that we're looking for by doing something wildly different than what most other banjo players do. That means you probably don't want to be playing like this or like this. So assuming you've got your picks on, and you're planted on the head of the banjo, and you've got your hand position more or less figured out, it's time to actually play something. And if you're new to the banjo, then you probably just want to start with some basic roll patterns like this. Start slowly and try to play each note cleanly and in time, and hopefully at an even volume across the strings. Right now it doesn't matter so much what you're playing, just pay attention to how it feels. One of the biggest misconceptions about right hand technique is that everything is supposed to be loose all the time. But actually we need to use our muscles to play the strings, and when we use our muscles, they're tense or engaged. And if we want to play loud and with power like some of our favorite banjo players, then that can require some pretty intense use of those muscles. The trouble starts when we don't release those muscles after we use them, or we store tension in other parts of our body that we're not actually using to play the banjo. So again, pay attention to how it feels to play those basic roll patterns. Are you using your muscles to play each string, or are you finding that you're using the muscles in your wrist or your arm or even your back to try to muscle through the notes? This is not an easy thing to have control over, but especially in the beginning, you want to build the habit of limiting tension. If you don't, I promise it's going to be a lot harder to fix later on. And then from this point on, you're ready to continue to learn new things on the banjo using this information as well as your own observations about other players' right hand techniques. The real process of developing your right hand technique involves listening to your own playing as well as paying attention to how it feels to play, and then making adjustments and deciding if you like the results. That could mean changing your picks or changing the shape of your picks or changing your right hand position. But remember, as you make these adjustments, to listen and evaluate so you can make an informed decision. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. And if you're looking for more tablature or more banjo content that you can't find here on YouTube, don't forget to go to patreon.com/EliGilbertBanjo. And don't forget, do me a favor and subscribe to this channel and like this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.